Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror, the podcast. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the owner, operator of Something Wicked Entertainment and Events, and welcome to our podcast today. So, we are continuing our franchise month right now by highlighting specific franchises and the movies in those franchises. Now, the difference between this podcast and other podcasts is that we are releasing an episode for each individual movie in the franchise, and we're releasing all those episodes in the same day. That means you get to listen to a whole bunch of different episodes if you so choose, or you can choose to listen to them throughout the whole week. But you'll have an episode for every movie in that franchise, which allows you, the listener, to actually hear what we think of each individual film and decide whether or not it is a film that's for you or not for you. So the ideal is if you've seen the first film in a franchise, or maybe even the second film, but you just didn't bother to watch the third, fourth, or fifth, or plus sequels in the film, by listening to the podcast episode, you'll be able to have a greater understanding of each one of the films and then decide on your own if you should go out and search out and watch the film. Now, we hope that you do, because some of the franchises that we are highlighting are some really good franchises, or they are franchises where some of the sequels are good, some of the sequels are not so good. You're going to get that in any horror franchise. They all can't be equally as good as the original. We try and we hope, but not always happens. So that being the case, the franchise we are discussing right now in today's episode is going to be the Final Destination franchise. And the film that we are actually going to be discussing in this episode is The Final Destination from 2009, which, because I saw it in 3D, we will mention that this was the first one that was in 3D upon its theatrical release. And to talk with me about this film is Philip Ray, who has been gracious enough to conversate with me on the other films in this franchise. So I want to thank you, Philip, for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Good. So I've already kind of given everyone a little bit of tidbit about me, because I saw this film at the theater in the 3D form. So I'll have a different type of opinion than you will. How did you see the film? And did you see it theatrical, or did you see it on DVD, or how did you see it? And what was your impressions of this film?
So I did not see the 3D. I ended up not seeing it in theaters either. I ended up seeing on DVD later on down the line. So my opinion of the movie is purely from the 2D aspect of it. This movie came out in the time when all the movies were going with a 3D gimmick. And by 3D gimmick, it's, oh, look at this, look, like things flying at you at the screen. It was not subtle, which obviously watching in 2D looks extremely hokey. But obviously it's because you're watching it in 2D instead of 3D. But yeah, it definitely... It's watching in 2D. It is obviously the gimmicky 3D.
Well, see, so that being said, I'm going to preface this to everyone who's listening to the show is I've only seen this movie twice. Once when it originally came out and I saw it in 3D, and then of course right beforehand before we did this show. So there was like a good 16 years in between when I first saw the film and when I second saw the film, because the films in this franchise are not films that I went back and rewatched. I saw them once, I saw what I need to see, and I just never went back to them again. That being said, this one for the longest time was probably my second favorite out of the franchise because of the 3D gimmick. When I saw this at the movies, I thought it was amazing and it was fun and it was cool as shit. But when rewatching it for the show, I didn't think it was all that interesting, and I thought that it was pretty not so spectacular. But the thing is, this film, which is the film that has the race car sequence at the very beginning, and anyone who's ever seen a live race car sequence we kind of hope for a car crash, which is what one of the characters actually says. But we hope that they don't have come anywhere near us. That being said, this is the film that's most furthest away from an actual, I guess, fear than what the other films did, with obviously the plane crash, a train crash, roller coasters, and of course the second film with being behind a truck with a bunch of logs on it. This one seems the most far removed because it's a race car, and not a lot of people go out there and watch race cars, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's definitely out of talking about the series as of right now. It is definitely the set piece that is the furthest away because again, more people, probably all the listeners here, have been a roller coaster more likely than they have been to seeing a NASCAR race, or seeing any type of race of that. Now, that being said, one, and I didn't talk about this on the last one, but last movie, but this is actually one of the few movies that is, I mean, obviously we've all have heard of plane crashes before, but this is one of the few movies that's actually pretty almost verbatim to an actual disaster. This is the crash at the beginning is very on point to the 1955 Le Mans disaster, where basically what happened in the movie happened kind of very similar in real life, where a car did end up getting essentially launched into a crowd of spectators and killing up to 84 people. So this is one of the few times that actually the disaster is actually pretty much based on an actual real life situation. In the last movie, with the roller coaster, there was an actual accident with the roller coaster that someone did get hurt. But the filmmaker said they weren't inspired by it. But this one, they were definitely inspired by that disaster.
That being said, this movie is different in that it just literally starts off with the car wreck. Unlike the other movies, before I noticed that before the credits even show up, the first thing you're seeing is the car wreck. Like the format of these films has now been established. People know what to expect, and they're not messing around with it in this film. And this is a short movie too. It's not nearly as long as some of the other movies. It's actually short. It's a short film because the one thing I really hated about this movie, and when I rewatched it, because I didn't notice this the first time I watched it, is that most of the characters in this movie don't have names and they're nondescript and they're simply cannon fodder. One is literally called the racist, the other one is called the cowboy, and I'm like, and you never know, like the stereotypes in this movie.
There's one character that got both in the credits. The Samantha character is in the credits known as MILF. And Samantha.
Yeah, I noticed that.
They did. Yeah, they did both.
Yeah, I kind of like. They just didn't want to bother. They did these stereotypes: a cowboy because he wears a cowboy hat. The mechanic even wears the mechanic overalls when he's going to a race car. Like he's going to a race car and he's wearing his mechanic uniform. And then
it's so the characters can figure out later, oh, this character is a mechanic. We've got to go to the mechanic place to go to one of the more lazier deaths in the movie. We'll talk about it overall with this episode, but this is one of the few ones that I think almost all, like, there's very few deaths in this that isn't just lazy.
Yeah. So for everyone who's if you've never seen this one, because we are now in the fourth film, and surprisingly, this was the most successful at the time because it was theatrical. I believe it was the theatrical because it was not theatrical because it was in 3D. And 3D was at its heyday when this movie came out, so it made a lot more money than it was probably supposed to be making. And it was a gimmick that worked. Like I said, a lot of the sequences in here worked in 3D, kind of like what they did in My Bloody Valentine 3D. They worked because they stuck to a formula, but watching it in 2D, it's a completely different experience. The thing is that you start off with a car crash, and then of course you kind of cut to the credits after that, and then you go straight into the story. The thing about this movie is, unfortunately, we do not get a Tony Todd sequence to kind of tell you the rules, and they don't go behind. They have to figure out the rules as the film goes on, but they figure it out in such an easy way because the audience already knows the rules. Like,
Which is the problem with the movie too. This is the first movie without Tony Todd because apparently he was in a schedule conflict with Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen was filming at the same time. So he was over there instead. But the problem with the movie, one of the biggest problems with the movie with that is the characters end up doing some of the research on, the previous actions and stuff, but they don't do. We're at this point in the franchise. There's enough of these incidences happening that the fact the characters go, oh yeah, they kind of get the general basis of it, but then don't do enough research to know about some of the other stuff that we as an audience member knows at this point in the franchise is one of the biggest issues with the movie and the story at least is that they just skim over it, but then they don't. But then if they did any more seconds of research, they would know because they know, okay, we can save. We know we can go and save people, and that helps them. But then they get the false idea of, oh, saving them means that they don't die, which at this point would have been obviously been not be factually proven if they continue their research like they did.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, this is different from the other movies in that for the most part of this movie, the main characters, which is Nick and Laurie, I don't really put George in it yet because George hasn't really joined those two for a good halfway through the movie. And then, of course, Hunt and Samantha, or not Samantha, but Hunt and the other one, Janet, the other girl. Janet, we'll get to her as well. But the idea is that Hunt, geez, I'm going to give you, because they're all indistinguishable by this point. Nick, the main guy who has the vision from the beginning of the film. We're going with another male character, like we did in the first film, who has the vision, but this visions are also triggers for 3D effects because he gets all these hints from the visions, and that allows the filmmaker Ellis. I can't remember Ellis's first name, his director, but it allows him to do these cool little 3D effects during his little what do you want to call them? Premonitions. So
premonitions, which again in 3D probably looked amazing. In 2D, it is so terrible. And for me personally, it is, at least right now in the franchise, the worst looking premonition. I hated the way the premonitions looked in 2D. It looked so generic gobbledygook. I heard someone say it kind of looks like off-brand Hellraiser moments, and I'm like, yeah, it does. I hated the way the premonitions look in the movie.
Oh, I'm not going to disagree with you on there. Like it's been what I say, 16 years since I've seen this movie. So the ideal behind it in 3D probably was really good, but when I watched it in 2D, I'm like, good God, these sequences keep coming up, and they're so oddly uninteresting.
They're just ugly.
That could be part of it. That could be definitely part of it, but not just that. Is that he has to see one for every fucking character in the movie. And I'm like,
except for the George character. The George character is the only character who doesn't get one.
Not because, yeah, no, he doesn't get one.
Because again, because apparently his premonitions is racist. Because that's a weird thing throughout the movie is we have two racist characters in the movie, which having the one character as you mentioned earlier that literally is dubbed racist in the credits, but then you have another racist character in the movie too. That's like, what are we doing here?
Well, yeah. What's his name? Jason Wellborn, who plays the racist. That's literally his character's name in here. Who is a Georgia actor and done some amazing stuff here. It just seems out of place for him to be in this movie because they don't give him anything to work with. He literally after the incident at the what's it called, McKinley Speedway. I wrote it down because I just wanted to say McKinley Speedway. So after the incident at McKinley Speedway, and the racist, because that's the only name they give him, couldn't go back into the speedway to save his wife before the accident. He blames George, who's the African American, Michael T. Williamson, for her death, and he just happens to be African American. And then, of course, he's one of the first people to die after the accident when he tries to go to his house and raise up a burning cross, and ends up getting, getting caught up in his own tow truck and burned alive himself while being dragged across the road. Now, obviously, that's quite funny to see the racist get burned himself, but it's such a hokey death because he catches fire and then all of a sudden the entire truck blows up. And I was like, oh my God. When I rewatched it, I was like, oh, really? They actually put this in the movie? Good God.
Like, again, like that, if they wanted to do a thing with that, it would have been more, they could have done a way more interesting death with that, with this, maybe he ends up like it, because he's trying to put a burning cross up. It would have been more interesting if somehow through like the Rube Goldberg-ish, he ends up becoming like the burning cross himself.
Yeah.
Like that would have been a funny little like a play on things. Like there's a lot of times, like again, a lot of the deaths in this is just so lazy. I mean, gosh, the Cowboys is one of the biggest examples of just, we just have to kill the character in a weird way. Or even the mechanic, like you get to the mechanic and it's like you have all of these cool potential ways you could have killed the character, and nope, he just gets hit by a canister and gets kind of cut up with the fence. That when I was rewatching it and I saw the fence, I'm like, I could tell the fence was going to be involved because it didn't look like a normal fence. Like it like no fence ever has that much thickness across like that. It just made no, it looked bad. It was just kind of disappointing.
It seems weird because, in my opinion, if that was to really happen at a mechanic's place, it would be probably one of those cheap fences, and the whole thing would have came down with that much force. That's how I would have seen it. Not the defense would have stayed straight up, and his body would have been imploded right through the fence. That just seems a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that they did not utilize the mechanics space, especially with all the other people that in that space, what they could have done there to make it much more interesting and visually stunning. I agree with you on that one.
For me, we'll talk. We're going on death, so we'll talk about like probably like the most iconic. The only ones that I actually remembered from this was The Rock. That was like probably in the sense of with the stereotypical of the way the Final Destination movies go with these Rube Goldbergs and fake outs. The Rock death was probably the most on point. Because again, you have her go to this nail salon, you get all of these things you think is going to kill her, and then it's just a rock that ends up getting shot through. Samantha, that was the character who died by that. That was probably the best death in the movie in the sense of keeping the formula down of it. The other one, which was the most hokiest of hokiest, was Hunt's death of being disemboweled from a pool drain pipe.
Yes, I know that just seems a little far-fetched as well. I liked what they did with the Janet. I did like the fact that that's the first time I remember where death is doing two different people at the exact same time, but in different locations. I think,
yes.
I don't know if that happens ever again, or because I don't remember the fifth movie either, and we haven't discussed that one yet. But I found it interesting that they were cutting between those two different sequences at the same time. I found Janet's much more interesting than Hunt's because I just thought his was kind of hokey as well when I rewatched it. getting sucked down the drainage of a pool. That has to be some serious suckage. And why isn't the water going due faster? Like if
Yeah.
water doesn't before Hunt gets stuck in there, it does not seem like there is a whole lot of water that pumps through there. Yet it's tough enough to pump a whole guy through there.
Well, it's also like it's edited really terribly because because when watching again, like Hunt is swimming by, but he's way above, and then suddenly they cut to suddenly he's like right next to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's edited very bad. And when I first saw it, I was like, oh, okay, he's going to drown. Like it's just holding him in, he's gonna suffer, he's going to drown, and then they're going to and like that's how he dies. And then when they get to the point where like his guts are going through and stuff, I'm like, wait, what? Like that's when it became again hokey. It became very hokey, very much like okay, we want to just do something wild and crazy. It got to the Saw effect of like we want to just we need to have blood and gore. We need to do something wacky and crazy. Let's have him get disemboweled from that. And I'm like, that doesn't make. I mean, his freaking shorts would have been ripped up first before his for all of that happens. Like and yeah, like you said, it's like that. I mean, if it's that powerful, no one could swim in that pool. Like
Yeah,
it just
you see someone else going down that pool as well as Hunt if it was that bad.
like the thing early on with the what the problem is by this point with the Final Destination movies. Well, first of all, let me also do a small tangent. The fact this movie is called The Final Destination because we were also at that point where everyone was doing the to the like they were acting like this is the last one
Yeah.
when we know it's never the last one. Uh,
Well, they probably did think it was going to be the last one, but they didn't think it was going to make nearly as much money as it did when they threw it in 3D.
yeah, so it's just I hate when movies do that. So but anyway, with this movie, it's at this point in in the franchise, they lost so much of the original idea of the fact that a lot of the deaths in the first couple movies were plausible. Like you kind of could see the again, you had a little bit of Rube Goldberg a bit about how it goes about, but it was practical. Like you could see to a point how some of this could accidentally happen. Again, it played on your fears about some of these stuff. But by the time you get to this in the last movie, some of the deaths are just, especially in this movie, it's just a lot of the deaths are just we want to just do something wacky. We want to do something hokey and wacky. We don't care how we get there. We just, again, it's the kind of the Saw thing of like, okay, we got to find a new inventive way to kill someone in a hokey wacky way.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Having the car wash try and kill Janet with a window that wouldn't close. And I'm like, if you can't control your window and you can't get it to stay closed, and they establish that before she goes into the car wash, why would you give your car a wash?
Yeah.
And like that just seems odd. And your car didn't look all that dirty, so you're just washing it for the hell of it. Okay.
Well, and then I know you wanted to touch up on Janet earlier, so we'll go and talk about Janet. And you have the whole thing about Janet knows that that's coming after them, and the fact that she's like such a terrible scene of I have to see this movie.
Oh
I
yeah.
was and it was and you're just like, okay, yeah, just die. Like you get to a point where it's like why do I care about you surviving at this point? Because clearly you don't care about surviving.
Well, she's like one of the characters. And I can't. These movies, and by this time, the movies are now going into my head and all coming jumbled out. So she reminds me of any of the other characters in the movies who want to defy their own fate and believe they have their own control and that they don't
Yeah.
care about what other people say. And she thinks that because she survived once, that it won't come back for her. Um, but you think she would have really learned her lesson after the freaking car wash sequence, but she doesn't.
Yeah, it just she doesn't, so you just don't care.
Well,
And
and the fact that this movie is almost giving a little self-aware on itself because it ends at a movie theater with the characters watching a movie in 3D, which is what the movie was. It was a movie in 3D. It was playing on that whole thing.
Oh yeah, it was definitely that was definitely purposeful. Which again, I will say, it does one of the things I one of my least favorite like story things they do in the Final Destination series in general is the fake out. The fact that they faked out Janet and Laurie's death was such a for me, it was such an ass pull because never in the series had they done that before, where they did the fake out where it's like, oh, the character's dead. Oh, nope. It was another premonition that somehow Nick had, which never has been done before.
Mhm.
No explanation of why he got the premonition at that moment. Because again, the way when he gets transported back in his premonition, he it's just a few minutes after George dies. So it's just kind of like, why does this premonition pull him back that far? Why didn't it pull him back farther? Why did it pull him just at that moment? It made no sense. It was such uh
It's fake out.
it's such a bad fake out. Just and again, it's only done so they literally can repeat the same thing they've done in the last couple movies of you have three characters at a diner or at a place and they end up getting all collectively killed by one thing. They did it in the first movie, they did it in the third movie, and they did it in this movie. And I really felt that's the only reason why they did that. It's just so they can formulaic do the same thing over again of having three characters end up getting killed by the same thing at the end.
Well, I did like the way I did like the in this. I don't think they did this in the fifth one. And to be honest with you, I can't remember if they did it in Bloodlines now. But the ideal that when what's his character? Nick has the second premonition, the real premonition, and it repeats back to right when George dies. But instead of going into the theater to save Janet and Laurie,
Yeah.
Laurie, he goes to save everyone in the theater. Um, that's different, but it's also odd. It's odd in this premonition that he sees all this stuff that he's not privy to. Like he's not in the room where the fire starts. So how does he know that's how the fire starts? Like the ideal for the premonitions at the very beginning of the movies is that the person is literally in that sequence and he's seeing all this stuff, and then it goes back and it repeats itself and he stops it from happening. But here he's seeing stuff that he's not privy to. So how does he know any of this happens?
It's just done for fake out.
It is a
Just
fake out for the audience, and this is why I told you earlier. I was like, I liked it when I first saw it in 3D because it was cool, but when I rewatched it, I was like, oh, this is a really bad movie. I mean, it has some cool sequences, but overall, because of the way they tried to make it to do the fake outs, the jump scares, and everything like that, they created like holes with their logic and their plot that make no fucking sense.
And the other thing too, again, they don't care about the characters. Right, speaking of right now of these four Final Destination movies, Nick is the blandest of the main characters.
Yes.
He is like, at least with the other movies, the main actor was interesting and engaging enough that you were interested. Nick is not that. The Bobby Capel, I don't know if to fully blame him for that or if it's just a script, but it just is not interesting to watch. He's not interesting to watch. The character's not interesting to watch. I mean, I care more. I mean, I was more interested in Laurie and that actress than I was in Nick with Bobby Campbell, and I think that he is definitely the weakest main character of the of these four movies.
Oh yeah, most definitely, most definitely. Um, yeah, but if I had never rewatched this, I would have said something differently. But upon rewatching it, I was like, oh my god, this movie is so many holes. I mean, it's not. It's just barely enjoyable. They better be lucky that even though it's a fake out, the death of Janet and Laurie in escalators is one of my favorite sequences. Probably couldn't happen like that, obviously, but it was cool to see it happen. Someone getting killed in the escalators.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that they ended it in a movie theater. And the movie, and just as the scene in the movie blows up, the entire screen blows up. There are aspects of this that I like. That's one of the big ones, but those plot holes and those pieces of logic, when they hang on you when you're watching this movie or rewatching it. And that's a problem.
Yeah, and sometimes you can, like, if you have an interesting character to
Yeah.
follow, whatever, then you can excuse that. But again, they knew that they didn't care about these characters, and it's even more apparent. Again, you can just watch the credits of how they name the characters, and they did not care.
Yeah, I think George is one of the more interesting characters because it's played by Michael T. Williams, and who
Yes, absolutely. And another like miss point was there's the scene where he revealed he tried to kill himself
uh-huh.
off screen and stuff, and you see the noose still around his neck and stuff from attempting to kill himself, and he's just like, "Yeah, I can't die." Uh, again, like that was if the again, this is what was great about Bloodline was they played on the comedy about a lot of it, and it's like that's a moment that they played too straight. It should have been they should have played more to that comedic side of it a little bit of George, like again, because it is funny. George is just like, yeah, I tried to kill myself and it didn't work, and stuff. Like it's kind of like morbidly funny, but again, they just played straight.
uh, it's morbidly funny in the same respect that if you saw Michael T. Williams' uh, performance in Species 2, he plays a very similar character. And when I was rewatching it, that's all I could see. I've seen him in a lot of movies, but these two movies here remind me of the exact same damn, like he was playing or channeling that same character, just a different name. His character is Species 2 in this movie here. I think he was the best thing in Species 2, and obviously he's the best thing in this movie too. So,
Yes, absolutely.
and his character, oddly enough, they give more information about than they do any other characters because he tells his story about the fact that he was responsible for his wife and kid because he was a drunk driver. I like see you give your. I mean, he does the things that he does because of that. He's relegated to accepting his fate and tries to commit suicide. There's reasons for all of this because he still feels responsible for the death of his family. Those are interesting aspects for that character, but they do none of that for any of the other characters in this movie.
No, none.
I mean, we just have a racist, a cowboy, and
A mechanic.
and a mechanic.
You got job titles. Oh, and MILF. You got a MILF.
In the middle, oh my god, these characters are so randomly boring. Uh, they're just randomly boring. They better be glad that this one here is the one I believe is so much more plot driven than any of the other films. It is. Let's get these characters from point A to point B to point C. We don't need to know anything about them. They're not that important. We just care about seeing each one of them die in a certain amount of time within the film, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Which is sad. I mean, like I said, when I saw this movie at the theater, 2009, wow, 3D was having its digital 3D was having its heyday, and this movie made a lot of money. None of us were looking at those details like that. We were really under the impression if we wanted to watch some good kills. Now that's unfortunate that that's what becomes of the fourth film in the franchise. People just want to see the creative deaths, and unfortunately, the story isn't really there. But I mean, it is a product of its time. I mean, we can recall any of the 3D movies that were released at the same time, and we'll probably come back with the same type of thing. Where can you think of any of them that were memorable? Not as much as I love the Resident Evil movies, the two that they released in 3D are not nearly the most memorable of them all. My Blade Valentine may be the closest one, more so than was the Clash of the Titans or some of the other ones being released. So that's what I have to say about that. What do you think about the gimmick of 3D though?
I mean, there's a reason why nowadays, uh, the movies stop like catering toward that. You don't see other than Avatar. There's not no movie right now is like advertising, oh, we're in 3D. I think that definitely was a gimmick of its time in the early 2000s to mid 2000s, and then everyone now it's like some movies may use it to a better effect, like a How to Train Your Dragon and stuff that they would use it to help elevate certain scenes. But definitely the gimmick of, oh, you have to see this movie in 3D because it's completely shot in 3D. That gimmick is gone. And I mean, for me personally, I'm fully okay with that.
I like watching movies in 3D, just like I like watching movies on the IMAX. I like the scope of the movies. I honestly don't remember the last one I saw in 3D. I know it was last year, but I couldn't tell you what movie it was because it probably didn't affect the final film all that much. I just liked watching it in 3D. It's not like when this came out, the Resident Evil sequels came out in 3D. The last Saw, the final chapter came out in 3D. Stuff like that. That would be interesting to go back and watch that one since that was around the same time. Seeing how Saw 10 or Saw the final chapter is what it's now called. Not called Saw 3D anymore. It's called Saw the final chapter, I believe. Or maybe that's Resident Evil the final chapter. See, now I'm getting them all confused because they're all 3D was in the title. I think it was Resident Evil 3D that became Resident Evil the final chapter. Oh Jesus, what a gimmick. Oh Jesus. Now, I don't see other than that whole thing that Nick has a second premonition. I don't see any of the anything new that they brought to the franchise with this film in particular. Do you remember seeing anything that you think they brought new?
No, they didn't bring anything new. Again, if anything, again, the problem when we get to the next movie, we can talk more about that one. But like this one, definitely did not bring anything new to this franchise. And again, it's definitely when you think of Final Destination and you think of the kills, there's a reason why this one's not really that ranked. If you did a ranking of all the Final Destination kills, there's a reason why this film's kills would be near the bottom for the most
Really?
point.
I still like the escalator one, but that one's not like so many other ones. So many. I mean, by this film, it's like, just like the Saw movies. By the time you get to Saw 5 or 6, it's very hard for them to come up with something new that looks creative and different and interesting.
Yeah.
They're pulling at straws here. In Final Destination, I think they're doing the same thing because these movies are coming out roughly every 2 to 3 years. So
Yeah, and they're kind of just rushing on like getting trying to get the spectacles of the kills, but not getting there. Again, that's why like for this, Samantha's is probably my favorite because it's the one that feels more on brand with the series of like, again, there's a lot of fake outs. You don't know what's going to do it. And then you get the small Rube Goldberg with The Rock ended up into the lawnmower and stuff.
yeah,
So
yeah, I will agree with you on that one because watching that whole Rube Goldberg sequence in the actual salon is very 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 cool. And then of course when the fan doesn't hit her when you think it is going to. That's a great fake out, of course, because you've forgotten at that point that there was a rock in the lawn and there was a lawnmower. The lawnmower man is drunk, drinking, and then that's how she dies. I think that was a extremely well done one. I don't think there's any other one that's well done. I think the whole sequence, complicated sequence to get to the theater blowing up, almost seems too complicated.
It's because you get to the point of it makes no sense because it's like, all right, you got a movie screen that apparently has all of this flammable chemicals right behind the screen, and you're like, what movie theater has this?
Yeah.
If I go to AMC, if I go behind the seats, I'm going to see a bunch of like vats of chemicals just chilling.
Yeah, I thought about that too. I was like, they couldn't just do one vat. No, they had to do a whole bunch of vats. I'm like, what exactly is this room being used for with all that shit up in there?
And then Nick trying to prevent it. It gets very much like the first movie with the shower scene where you're almost directly physically seeing Death trying to stop Nick from succeeding on preventing the explosion and stuff.
Mhm.
And you're just kind of like, oh, we're back to this where like Death is kind of physical, is having some physical manifestation because you basically are seeing him physically try to stop Nick.
Yeah, but thankfully you don't actually see them roll back any of that stuff. That was one of the things I wanted to discuss because in the first film it was what we thought of as a fault in the film.
Yeah.
But they don't do that again in any of these other sequels, which is actually a great idea because we thought that was one of the weaknesses of that first film. If any weakness, that was like the only weakness of the first film. With these subsequent movies, which have multiple different weaknesses, they actually fixed that problem, and we don't have that problem again, thankfully.
Yeah.
So, what else can we talk about the Final Destination that we can think of, so that we make sure that we cover this one?
I mean, that's basically fun trivia.
Okay.
So James Wan was supposed to direct this, but he ended up dropping due to scheduling conflicts because he was directing Dragon Ball Evolution at the same time. Which out of the two, I don't know. Well, actually, Dragon Ball Evolution is worse. If there's an alternate timeline where James Wong decided not to do Dragon Ball Evolution and did this movie, maybe this movie would have been a little bit more better, and Dragon Ball Evolution would have never graced the movie screens ever.
Well, keep in mind that the reason why he was doing that movie is because he was probably given a bigger budget and it was a non-horror film, which most everything else in his career was. So he was trying to expand from that. I can't remember when the one came out, which they both did. I don't remember when the one came out, but his
The one came out. The one came out right after the first Final Destination movie.
Was it? Yeah. See, I've lost
one.
I haven't seen it in so long, but the one didn't make any money, from what I remember. So him and his partner were relegated back to horror again. And then of course eventually they became producers and they stopped directing altogether, which was sad. When I looked at their filmography, I was like, oh, I love their work. Even when they separated, I love their work. But they both stopped directing, so that was Dragon Ball Z kind of probably killed his career.
Yeah, it killed a lot of people's careers.
The fact is, it's like I was thinking about Double Dragon, Dragon Ball Z, fucking Street Fighter. Dragon Ball Z was based on an animated cartoon, but these video game style films audiences didn't care for at that time.
No, it was very niche. It was that's the only good thing about what this movie did was it killed off any other potential live action anime adaptation. Well, up until we get to Ghost in the Shell.
Ghost in the Shell.
Big Eye Girl. I'm forgetting right now.
Battle
Uh,
Alita.
Ballerita. Thank you.
Oh, that was much later though. That was after we've had successful ones. I
Yeah.
only, I mean, Ghost in the Shell. I'd have to look at the figures for that one, because the international figures. I know it didn't do well here in the States, but for some reason I keep thinking it did fine overseas. But I could be completely wrong about that. So,
Um. So
uh,
yes, it definitely was a it definitely killed that off for a while, and that was probably good. Um, Ghost of the Shell did okay box office. It was still treated as a oh, it's still treated as a bomb.
yeah, I don't think it's a bomb unless it makes no money. But you know, these figureheads around the town like to say, if it doesn't make this three times its budget at the theater, it's a bomb, and that's not necessarily true. So,
Yeah.
especially considering that most of these films will make their money on streaming services and everything else, especially if it's a Universal picture or someone doesn't who doesn't have their own streaming service. Universal loves to sell their movies to other streaming services, and they have no interest in creating a streaming service. They make more money just renting their movie out. Uh,
But but anyway, we're instead of talk, but yeah, so we could have had a future where James Wan directed this, didn't do Dragon Ball Evolution, and maybe he would have still had a career. But instead we got this movie.
it's fine. It made a lot of money. I don't know if you're still staring in front of the figures now. I remember this one being what the highest grossing one in the franchise, and the second.
Yeah, it was the highest grossing at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. I mean, the thing is, 3D helped make this movie make a lot of money. I guarantee you, it was at the cycle where people thought it was going to be the last one, which is why they called it the Final Destination 3D. It made way too much money, and they said, "Oh, we got to crank one more out." And then they did the fifth one, which did not do as well. And I was like, saying, of
Uh,
course not.
yeah,
Yeah,
the Final Destination is until we get to Bloodlines was the highest grossing of the series.
yeah. I remember. I remember that. I was like, oh shit, okay. I think it's the shortest one too, lengthwise, runtime wise. This is like they don't pad this movie at all. It goes from death to death to death. They even do two deaths or try to do two deaths at the same time, and then by the time you get to the end, which I actually do like the ending of this, uh, when they're at the cafe and the damn truck rams through the freaking front of the cafe. Shit, what was the cafe called again?
It was like Le Cafe, like Le Death, uh, the Death by Caffeine,
Yeah,
Death by Caffeine.
Death by Caffeine. Oh, I like the title of that. Of course, the truck comes through the window, and we see an X-ray uh, style. Each one of the people get killed. I thought that was a brilliant touch. I thought that was a great way to end the movie. That everyone gets killed that way because that was different. Um,
Although again, having the characters reunite at the beginning, it was very much on brand of the
yeah,
first movie.
yeah. But they've now established the fact that no one survives these fucking death. Everyone dies eventually, and so we're waiting for that to happen in this movie. It's trying to see how it's going to happen to them. Um, but seeing them like their bones and stuff crack and break and twist, I thought was really clever. So you don't actually see like a real person's body that happening to.
That was a nice touch.
Yeah, I did like that touch, the way they ended. But this is such an this is what happens when a franchise goes on too long because they don't know when to stop it because it's still making money, yet the actual creative talent behind it is lacking tremendously.
Yeah, it's one of the things. Again, the only reason, again, this kind of shows you again, they weren't really there wasn't a lot of love put into it. Was David Ellis said he only did this movie because it was in 3D and he hadn't done a 3D movie at the time.
Yeah.
Uh, that's the only reason why he took it, not because he was actually interested in the project. It was just because it was a 3D movie. And he hadn't done one yet. Uh, and and it very much, and even when he was talking about it, he was interested in doing 3D because uh he liked the concept of stuff popping out to the audience every like 4 minutes, which again, that's if you're thinking the movie like that, then you should go to an amusement park ride. 'Cause that's what they do in an amusement park ride. You want that? Go see Bugs Life 3D. Go see Shrek 3D. Uh Having that mentality for a movie, it's just, I mean, that's what we got. Spy Kids 3D.
Oh, come on. Robert Rodriguez did all his own 3D effects and everything. It's so much fun and stupid at the same time.
Oh, it was.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, so are there any final words that you have for the Final Destination? Any tidbits, anything that we need to instill upon our audience?
No, other than again, if it's I am glad it's not the Final Destination because we ended up getting Bloodlines, which
Mhm.
was phenomenal and the best of the series. But it is definitely, as of right now, until we talk about the last one, it is the weakest of the series by far.
Yeah, I will agree with you on that one. And this is due to the passage of time did not age this one well at all, and neither did the lack of watching it again in 3D.
Yeah.
All right. So, with that, everyone, we are going to rate the movie. If you have listened to our show before, we love to rate the movies from 1 to 5 stars, 1 being horrible, 5 stars being amazing. Where on the spectrum do you place the Final Destination 3D, Mr. Phillip?
1.5. And I'm being generous with the 1 point. I'm only putting the point, that 0.5 is only there because of George.
Oh, shit. I give it a 2, mostly because the sequences I like is the sequence at the end with the escalator and the fact that in the movie theater I get to see everything fucking blow up. But that's almost like completely obliterated by the fact that it was just fucking premonition. But I still like those 2 sequences, and like I see Michael T is just brilliant. He steals the movie just like he did in Species 2. So I gotta give it a 2. It's not lower than 2 for me. Oh, Jesus. All right, everyone. I want to thank you, Phillip, for talking with me about the Final Destination 3D. From everyone out there, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope that you check out all the other episodes that we've released today that have to deal with the other films in the Final Destination franchise. Also, make sure to check out our episodes from earlier in the year on Final Destination Bloodlines, because that was the first one we did, and it is from earlier in the year. Make sure to check out all of our previous episodes because we've done a lot of great movies over the course of the last 2 years. And if you've been following us this month, you will have some unique opportunities to listen to episodes about other franchises. So make sure to check that out as well. Like, share, follow, subscribe, do that thing you do with your favorite podcast in your favorite podcast app, Spotify, and YouTube. From everyone here at Something Wicked Entertainment, we want to wish you a pleasant day and keep watching those franchise movies. Good day. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, written, produced, and directed by Kevin L. Powers, executive producer Kelly A. Inoka. All contents and material from this episode of Conversations in Horror is copyright 2025 Broken Lighthouse Pictures.